Welcome to another episode of In Good Company. My name is Bill Joel, and I have the pleasure of introducing several people related to a company called Puppix. Today we have Ben Mars, who is the director of Puppix, Izzy Bristow, who is lead puppet engineer with Puppix, and Dik Downey, who is a puppeteer and educator with Opposable Thumb Theater Company. Oh, welcome to In Good Company.
Hi there. Thank you.
Hey.
Cheers.
I had the pleasure of seeing you and your cohorts, Ben, present at the recent SIGGRAPH conference several times, and that's why I contacted you for this, so that you could share with our audience, educators, what you've been doing and hopefully inspire them to maybe take a look at this approach to motion capture. Speaking of which, why don't you just tell us a little bit about how what Puppix is, and how the company came to be?
So Puppix is a technology system for taking physical puppet performances and capturing them into animation in real time. So effectively, what you're doing is you're performing your animated character in the live space, interacting with the environment, interacting with other characters and performers, and that animation performance is being captured and is then available to use or enhance or just play straight and live.
Now, am I right that puppets have been used and are still being used as quote unquote stand-ins during production for CGI characters? So what is the current state right now, the way puppets are being used?
So my understanding, and I'll defer to more experienced folk in this, is that reference puppetry is being used. So you have a puppet performance taking place on your set that your actor can interact with. It's used for eye lines, positions. But what's typically been happening up till now is that the animators will look at where things sat and then animate based on position, based on the timing. But what you don't get is that live performance that took place at the time being recorded and transferred into the animation.
Hmm. So what do the puppets look like that they actually use? I mean, do they look like the eventual CGI character or not? I'm seeing nods in the background, so Izzy or Dik, either of you who want to chime in, please.
Having had the fortune to work on some of these productions sort of that happen, they can do a bunch of different things generally if it's a fairly large character. So at the moment, there's this incredible series about prehistoric beasts that's just coming out on BBC. I think, was it iPlayer? I can't quite remember. But they worked to find a system where they would have very, very realistic faces and hands of these, or paws rather, because almost all of these puppet characters were animals. So you'd have realistic paws and you'd have realistic heads, and then the rest of the particularly large characters would be filled out by just sort of sheets stretched over kind of constructions of pipe. And that was partly because they were transporting these massive creatures all over the world. And that was their way of getting the modularity that you need for this. But that was just, and for them specifically, it was important to have the actual colors and textures of the final characters or the final animals, so that the lighting reference would be correct. And a lot of this happened because they were filming live outside in the environments that they thought were similar to the environments of this prehistoric creatures, sort of in Australia and in South America and stuff. You don't need that quite so much when you're filming indoors. If you're filming on like a live set, you don't have to worry quite so much about like the color correction. I don't really do color correction, but I'm led to believe that that is the case. And then every once in a while, you'll get somebody who will build an absolutely stunning full size, full render puppet that they will do live. And that sort of tends to be from like hero shots, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you have a really beautifully rendered Pikachu. I think there's a couple Pikachu puppets that were produced for those films. But they didn't do very much, and they were just mostly there for color reference and size reference. I think also gets a little bit forgotten how important it is for an actor to interact with something that is the right size. So you get size and color. You don't really get motion all that frequently within the current state of puppets. And I personally don't know of any other particularly large companies that on a regular basis do the motion capture directly to CGI. A lot of times it's more like frame by frame sort of reference. But I might be wrong
sort of
that
like
do puppet instead of
dating myself.
animating. So,
Going back to something like Lord of the Rings with Golem.
Yeah.
The way
Yeah.
they didn't have him in a bodysuit. He was just an actor acting part with the voice and everything, and then animators literally drew over, not quite rotoscoping, but akin, similar to that. As you said, is basically using it as a reference for the final CGI rather than contributing actual numerical data about the motion.
Yeah.
So, any and all of you, can you tell me how Puppix approach differs from how puppets have and are being used for production?
So,
I mean, how does your approach differ?
So I mean, effectively, what you're doing is, as you were saying, the Lord of the Rings initial approach to mocap was rotoscope, and to an extent, that's what's going on with puppets now. And what we're bringing in is basically motion capture for non-humans. So you've got characters that don't move like humans, aren't weighted like humans, interact with the world in a different way.
Frequently have more legs than humans.
Yeah.
Now you're not putting the dots on the puppets like an emotion.
No.
So how are you capturing the motion?
So what we've got is a combination of different sets of sensors, both within and outside the puppet. Because one of the problems with trying to do something like one of the problems of doing human motion capture, one of the typical ways of doing that is optical tracking. And what you find is as soon as you start interacting, even if you've got two human characters, they will get in the way of each other. And if you've got puppeteers, you are almost always going to get in the way of your character. There's been there was a Henson's character who had optical track, who was basically being tracked like this, so you're not getting stuff in the way. But the sort of table puppetry, which is a full-size character being operated on a surface, that we're doing, you've got puppeteers around it. So if you're just relying on one type of tracking being image based, you are going to get occlusion. You're going to get people getting in the way. And as I say, you get that on human motion capture. If you look at boxing mocap and things like that, typically you'll do the capture of one person and do the capture of the reactions separate. If you're doing the mocap for it, you don't typically have both people in there because you start getting in the way, and you definitely would with this. So what Puppix is doing is taking various different types of sensors. So one of the things we found is that people tend to go, oh, this is my favorite type of sensor, and this is the way it'll solve everything. And there is no one type of sensor that is ever going to be the solve everything. So what we're doing is having various different types that we're running in tandem with each other. And so we're getting the advantages and hopefully cancelling out most of the disadvantages in the combinations. So we've got sensors internal to the puppet, sensors external to the puppet, and we're combining all that data together.
Okay, I was just going to ask, in the sense of what these puppets look like, do they look like the final CGI character in the end or not? Because Izzy was saying that yes, with some of these larger characters, you may have the hands and the feet and parts that truly look like the final character, but that's it. It's not the whole final character. But my understanding, you know what? You have a video, don't you, that you could show us? So why
we
don't
can.
why don't we let the people look at the video now, all right? And then we'll come back
Okay.
and talk again.
Yep. So here are some of our unrendered, unpainted characters in operation.
Okay.
And whilst you're watching that, we will nip behind the curtain and pull out Sweet Pea.
Okay.
So, why do we want to use puppet performance? Why not use animation? Because physical puppets actually exist on a film set. They can be directed in real time. They can interact with other characters. You can work with them as though they were live actors. So why not just use human motion capture? Because that motion always looks human. The movement and timing look incorrect when used on a cartoon character or fantasy creature. Whilst puppets built with the same physicality as our characters move like our characters. Heavy, light, 2 legs, 4 legs, no legs. What could be better than a system that combines the very best of live puppet performance with the unlimited possibilities offered by digital animation?
Three, two, one.
Are we on? Is it rolling? Oh! Here. Hello, people. My name's Kevin, and I'm a gnome. I'm lying. My name's Oswald, and I'm a goblin. Yeah, goblin. I was going to say gremlin, but we're similar. We're related at birth. Anyway, I'm waffling. I'm going to start again from the beginning. There. We finished? Should we cut? Somebody said cut.
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 Five, take 3, 3, 2, 1. And leap.
1, 2, 3. Go!
Cut.
Go! Quick look. Big jump. Oh dear.
Fast look back. Hold. Quick look over to the others. Look to audience. Think. I thinks. I thinks. Look to us. Breathing, that's nice. Nice.
Oh, nice. Skitter?
Bend down a bit more, Dave.
Okay. Okay. Sit.
that I think that video really gives a good idea of what. Wait a minute, we have another guest here.
Yeah.
Who do we have? So who do we have here now?
So this is Sweet Pea.
And I believe Sweet Pea.
Online app, will you
I think Dick, you generally
Head spinning around. Say that again.
you generally voice the puppet, right?
Yeah, I've been working with Ben on Sweet Pea and various other characters for quite a while. And let me just get this out. Oh, figure it out. Sweet Pea's currently built onto a stand to make life much easier for her to just to be static. But on the whole, yeah. So I've been working with Sweet Pea, and she's nimble and agile, but also quite heavy.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask that question. Given that there are actuators and sensors, etc., inside of Sweet Pea,
Yeah.
do you sense it that acting through the puppet isn't any different with this sort of a puppet with all the sensors, etc., than acting with a typical puppet? Do you find
There's some limitations because of the weight restrictions and sort of at the moment the current mechanisms that we're using are quite delicate and fragile, so you can't be as robust as you would be with a bog standard puppet or puppet that you've made specifically for one type of scene. And the thing is with Sweet Pea that she has to fulfill quite a lot of different requirements. So she's got a lot of motion in her arms and her eye and her mouth and various other parts. But like with any puppets, the more things you require from them, the more limitations that they have on each other. There's knock-on effect. If you start trying to make a really good eye mechanism that can do everything, then you're limiting the space that you can have to put your hand in to move the mouse, perhaps. But at the moment, Sweet Pea is working beautifully. And then we've got another much bigger quadruped wolf or bad dog, depending on what characteristic it's decided to take on. And that one involves 5 puppeteers gathered round, and one on each leg and just somebody on the head. And then quite often we have to rope somebody else in for the tail. And that's once again that one has its own other limitations because of the scale of what we're trying to do with it. But the thing about it is that as we get more and more au fait with what we're doing, and as Izzy gets more competent in the different mechanisms and techniques that we can incorporate into them, that I think the whole weight issue is going to sort of reduce, and we're going to certainly have a lot more fun trying to create new different characters.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming, Izzy, that means that you're still playing with the nature of what kind of sensors to use, how many, etc.
I'm less involved in the sensors and more involved in the integrating the sensors into working puppets. It's one thing to have a system of sensors and all of the technology and have all of the wiring stuff. I'm skilling up on that as quickly as I can so that I can be a better assistance to the rest of the people within the team. But I came on as a puppet maker who specializes in sort of more lifelike animal puppets. And obviously Sweet Pea isn't a lifelike animal puppet, but we were able to sit there and be like, oh, but we quite like one that's got backwards bending legs, so it feels less human and stuff. And I could work with that as far as the design and the production goes. Yeah, so my role winds up becoming more sort of figuring out between the animation rig and the real life puppet where the joints actually need to be placed in order to get the correct movement in such a way that a puppeteer can actually handle it, while we can still get the same performance out of it that is needed by the final CG render.
And then I'm coming from a background in CG animation, and so I've got an understanding of how that works, and I'll be making requests and thinking about how I would do it if it was an animator, and running up against the fact that, well, yes, but puppeteering is not animation. You're creating the illusion of life in both, but there are different ways of doing things. We do have a bit of footage of Good Dog in a couple of different interactions with people if you want to have a look. But
And so dealing with that last puppet, were there any other issues you ran into, problems you had to solve specific?
I
I
think
mean, that's obviously a much more realistic looking puppet as opposed to Sweet Pea.
we wound up having a couple choices to make in order to make the CG better in the end. We had initially planned to make a fully furred wolf that would sort of fill in a lot of those gaps that you see. But in discussion with the kind of person on our team who's involved with those sort of final renders, he was like, do not give me fur. I will supply the fur in the end as the person who's actually in charge of the final animation. So that was a choice that we made very specifically to make his life easier. And yeah, was there any
Yeah.
other reason why we chose to do fur?
Yeah, because if similar to the creatures you were talking about, you can do, if you're doing fur on the contact surfaces, then if people are interacting, you've got real fur that you can interact with. So we do have the capacity to place fur onto Good Dog. But in the main shots, what you're going to be wanting to do is paint over the character, because it's at times going to be interacting with people. So what you want is for the paint over to be just slightly extended beyond the limits of the puppet. So if you have a furry puppet, you've got a load of fur that you're having to paint out. Whereas if you've got a smooth puppet and the fur extends beyond that skin, your CG fur is overlaid over, and you're doing less roto to get rid of it and less comp. So it's a mix. You need for close-up interaction, you're better off having actual fur and the CG beyond your contact points. But in the main, Good Dog is not furred, and as standard isn't run as furred.
I suppose there is you need to have the puppet be close to the final CGI character so that the human actors, when they interact with the puppet, they get a good sense of what it's going to be like in the end. But you don't have to have it be letter perfect.
You need to be pretty close to letter perfect, because because you're getting the interaction with the world, the interaction with other people, and the physicality from the actual character in the room. And so if you don't do that, then you're having to do things where you have a character who you might need to be going, oh, hold on, the hand doesn't quite hit where it should do, or the contact points aren't. And if you've got weight and volume in there, if your weights and volumes don't match up between the characters, then it doesn't transfer across properly. So the way we build is you don't do a CG then a practical, or a practical then a CG. You're building them in tandem, and you're constantly going backwards and forwards between them. We've got some just sort of a quick a sense of humanity for Sweet Pea, which just gives you an idea of the sort of stills of development as we go. I'll just show you some of those. But yeah, it's a constant back and forth. We've got some of the early footage that we shot, sort of our first Hello World test with a little goblin character, and in that the puppet doesn't have the same physicality, and we were running into the problems of limb lengths being different, and particularly there was I think the point where the character's bringing its hand past its face, and it's got a nose, but the nose is not in the same place. So
yeah,
that
was in the video that we had just seen. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and the practicalities of it are, you want to get as one-to-one as you can, not just in terms of limb lengths, but also in terms of volumes and in terms of how you're distributing the weight around. Because then the interaction of the puppet with the world, with its fellow performers, maps across to the CG. I don't know if you remember, there's that little bit at the end of the Hello World where we go cut, and the arm drops, and you get this swing, and all of that is coming for free. If you're doing that in CG, you'd be having to get all that secondary movement animated. But because you're character is actually doing that movement, that transfers across to the CG. So you have to try and match the whole physicality in order to get that free movement, because otherwise you're going to be having to retarget or adjust.
Also, as a puppeteer, having the actual physical character looking like you really want it to look, it gives you much more to work with as far as characterization is concerned, and finding the movement within the puppet that gives you the secondary, well, the movement within the animated character. The fact that you're doing it live and you have your hands on and you know exactly how the puppet works, it gives you more sort of ownership of the characterization of what it does and how it moves, and the way that you, if you're going to be voicing it and things like that. And I think quite often with, sometimes you see on animations that the voice actor is entirely separate from the whole process, and all they're just doing is they're in a booth recording a voice without really, they may have some design sketches or something like that. But if you're actually involved in the actual character itself and bringing it to life and moving it physically, then you sort of have a certain ownership and sort of.
I've seen recent videos of from the Henson Company, how they've done some of their children's animations, and several more steps removed from the actual final result. And by the way, Ben, when you're talking about the arm swing, etc., I've spent like almost 40 years teaching computer animation programming, so I know exactly the physics that's involved to get that to work.
Yeah, and it's in some ways it's moving, because I mean this is the sort of thing that originally was being done on Jurassic Park. So you got Tippet and then you've got Sill, and those were repurposed stop-mo rigs. So you're using them as control systems. But the difference there between that and what Dik is doing is you're watching a screen and you've basically got a very complex and fancy joystick to move things around with, but all of your performance energy and all the focus is out there on the screen. You're not in the room. And this Puppix brings everything back into the room and gives the performer the performance.
It also gives you spontaneity, improvisation, accidents, all of the things that actually would make the character seem much more believable. And you've captured it all in real time, so that any little tiny mistakes or little sideways looks that you would do just instinctively as a puppeteer, you wouldn't consider doing it as an animator, because you're so concentrating on getting it accurate. You'd forget to put in mistakes, or you're asked to put in mistakes perhaps to make it look more believable. But if you're doing them naturally, and just little idiosyncrasies that come with that particular character, and the puppeteer is involved with it, it gives it much more of a three-dimensional life than just a animated character.
Exceptionally valuable in spaces where you've got both a CG/puppet character and live performance in the same room, where you can sort of like tweak that or respond to that in real time across the CG and live action divide.
So you can try out different approaches, different takes to actually
let's say let's do multiple takes, and instead of having to do all the work post-production, we gotta fix this, we gotta fix this, we gotta fix this. No, you just the more you can capture initially, that will end up in the final cut. The more you can capture right up front, the less cleanup you have to do.
Also, it gives the director much more freedom, so that if they decided they didn't like the way they were playing it, they could ask the performers to play it in a more jovial manner or a more dramatic way. And it hasn't changed anything that people are doing apart from just doing a new take. But if you were asking animators to completely change the sort of subtle style of how they're performing it or creating it, then it'd be a lot more work involved. Whereas we could just do it in a second take or a third take and try it in a different way entirely.
Rather than come back about 2 weeks later and say, again, please.
I don't quite understand this note.
Okay. Last question I have, and remembering that our series is primarily targeted to educators. And one of the things I do is try to bring in people to talk about new ideas of things that are being done with respect to animation, graphics, etc., to maybe kickstart something in the mind of an educator to try something different in the classroom. So do you have any ideas of how an educator might be able to use these kind of concepts in the classroom to maybe just simply how do they could use this to introduce motion capture to students? I mean, is there any way that they could take the approach from Puppix and use it in the classroom? Any ideas?
You could take some of the technology that's around for moving controllers around and just start making quite simple puppets using the controllers. So there are people out there currently doing a direct transfer of a controller into a CG character live. So when people talk about digital puppetry, that's typically what you're doing. But if you were to build a puppet and combine that with even the simple controllers, then you've got your focus and you've got your performance moved from the screen into the room. You wouldn't need to do particularly complex capture systems. Even just something that is going to be able to pick up rotation and position in one piece will let you perform a character in that space and think about how you're getting the interaction.
Yeah, what you said.
Yeah.
I'm glad we all agree.
Yeah, but also, I mean, if they were using it in a classroom environment, then you've also got you could look at different ways of how you could use it as far as dynamism is concerned, as far as directly, like you could direct in a room and you try and looking what happens if you do it in a sort of aggressive style or a subtle manner, or is the puppet in space? You could change the locations, you could change the sort of the requirements that are the limitations that are built around the puppet, or because it's a puppet, you can take it anywhere you really want.
And a step away maybe from some of the technical stuff. I work most frequently, as far as animation is concerned, with stop motion animators, and the number of times I see them just sort of step away a little bit and play with the puppet with loosened joints to sort of figure out some blocking and stuff. I think even if you don't want to have the motion capture element of it, just sort of having a sense of playfulness by engaging with a physical item, in addition to just your sort of technological thing. I know that there's a lot of animators out there who will sort of perform their scene in order to interpret that into like their human character. Why not sort of have a small dog puppet and sort of interpret that into your dog character? But that's probably a little bit less technical, but I do like it when I see animators do that.
Technical or not, I mean, again, the purpose for these videos that we create is to, throw new ideas at educators, have them think again about how they want to introduce certain concepts. And our own opinion in creating these videos is the more educators are exposed to, the more they hear, the more they see, the better they can be teaching, because they have more that they can draw upon teaching.
And
anyway,
I mean, if you have access to any form of motion capture at all, then put a physical puppet in combination with it. And because you're not doing something as complicated as us, then it's not an issue if you're getting in the way. You can mostly stay out of the way, and there'll be I'm moving back into technical again. But play and have the character exist in the room, have it exist as a character in its own right. So you should be just watching points where it's creating the performance. I started out doing stop mo, and there's a point I remember the character just doing things that I had not intended and were not in the script. And I'm watching this happen just a frame at a time, and then play back and frame at a time, and I'm just thinking, what is it doing? Oh, it's annoyed. And that point where the character is in possession of the space is why I'm an animator, and also why I love puppets.
Well, anyway, folks, thank you very, very much for the presentation, and I hope that this maybe, as I said, kickstarts something in the mind of a few educators to try something a little different.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
And if anyone would like to come and play, I realise we're in the UK and that most of your educators are based several thousand miles away.
No. Our educators are worldwide.
Well, in that case, if anyone would like to come and play, we will be putting together some sessions of basically testing out and seeing what can be done.
Maybe you'll get some people from Bournemouth, where you have the National Center for Computer Animation in the UK.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll come and say hello.
That's true. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much for a really, really interesting presentation.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, Bill.
Bye.
Thank you.